People today, looking back on the 3 zombie films, I think that there are really split camps. And there are some people that you can't get them away from the first film. You know, that's their love. And there are some people that just sort of celebrate and party with Dawn of the Dead. It's sort of the wildest of the 3. It was also the most popular. And then there are the real trolls, you know, like Day of the Dead. I had this, after doing Dawn of the Dead, I had this realization that, gee, one was the late 60s, and this was the late 70s. And I suddenly got this conceit about, well, maybe I'll do one of these every 10 years and try to, reflect a little bit of what's going on. So Day of the Dead really grew out of that 80s, I was giving up on everything, government, the military, the faith in, financial systems, and everything was just starting to look, geez, man, what we've been building up, house of cards here. Originally, I wrote Day of the Dead as bigger. It would have cost about $6 or $7 million.
The original script for Day of the Dead was a phone book. It was Raiders. It was Ben-Hur with zombies in it. I mean, it was a major effects film.
All of the stuff that's in the existing Day of the Dead, but there was also an above-ground encampment.
A group of people who had fortified themselves against the zombies created a camp with the society kind of crumbling both physically and morally.
It had some outdoor action sequences and some chase stuff.
The script, I remember sitting on my couch in my parents' basement, reading that script and just being floored by it. I loved that script so much, and I just thought, man, this is going to be the coolest zombie film ever made.
George was very lucky. He's got this great team around him, and they all grew up as amateur filmmakers on Night of the Living Dead. Tom Savini, Mike Gornick, Cletus Anderson, all part of the team. My job was to, I guess, go around with the oil can and keep the wheels turning,
In those days, it was a family business, and it was always, everybody did whatever was necessary. And, my slot was just assistant director because I was always with George, and I learned a lot.
I would say for the first 2 months or month and a half, we began building based on the original script.
There was an underground laboratories. There was also an above-ground encampment, and there were corrals where they kept the zombies.
Then they had legions of soldier zombies.
It would have involved more extras, it would have involved more effects, it would have involved more crew, cameras.
It became clear that the resources were not at hand to include all of that.
I mean, Salah said, look, I can't do it unrated at that much money. When you release a film unrated, it's considered an X. So certain newspapers won't take advertising for it. There are a lot of disadvantages. So I was afraid that I would have to, really water it down and not be able to do a really hard version that I wanted to do. Salah said, look, I'll give you $3 million and you can do unrated whatever you want to do. So I made the decision and, quickly rewrote it, just sort of simplified it, brought it down to what its essentials are.
He wanted a much bigger film, but he had to settle for something that would fit within the parameters of the budget.
I think if there were more money, there would have been, eyes around every corner.
It wasn't the optimum from George's point of view, the script. So my feeling is that that he put a bit of anger into it. But that angry script was the one that we went into pre-production on, yeah.
So I decided to go the smaller route and just really make the film the way we made the other ones, more or less like a little family group.
She's a fucking loony bin. I ain't being paid enough to work in a fucking loony bin.
I ain't being paid at all.
Hey.
Last paycheck, Steele.
It was an ensemble cast. Terry Alexander, Jarlath Conroy playing a mad drunken Irishman, Gary Clark playing the big beefy guy, and Ralph. They were all good. Everybody just played it for what it was. It was just a send-up, really, you know.
I didn't know George personally. I had met him when I was like, let's see, in the 8th grade when Night of the Living Dead premiered. And my father was actually in the original Night of the Living Dead. He played himself, Chilly Billy. He was a television host in the 60s. And I was living in New York at the time, and I was doing a play called Reckless. George was in the audience. We sort of rekindled all of our connections. There's this connection that Pittsburgh people have, and he enjoyed my performance and saw me as the character of Sarah. So that's how it worked out.
George is doing another picture, you know, and it's like, well, yeah, okay. Maybe I could play like a zombie or something. And they called, and it was, yeah, George wants you to read for Rhodes. And I'm like, huh? And I went in and I auditioned and kept my fingers crossed, and I got the role. I was like, gee, this is good. This is good.
George Romero was at the audition, and he gave me some directions, and I did them. It was mostly dumb show. Bub doesn't really have any lines. It was entirely an improvisation. And I did my zombie thing, and I got the job. Bub was sort of the mascot of the shoot, and I really sensed that all the people on the other side of the camera were rooting for me, and that was a real nice thing.
When George did the rewrite, he really based the entire thing on the Wampa Mine facility, this huge underground storage facility.
I found the location before I completed writing the script. It's an existing limestone mine in the hills outside of Pittsburgh. People store yachts down there. Old Hollywood negatives are down there, valuable papers of all kinds.
And there were miles of lakes in the back of this place. And it was dark, and there were these little light bulbs hanging.
It was easy to get lost in there, lots of corridors going in lots of different directions.
It was pretty scary, you know, out there.
Every once in a while, bats would fly around and stuff.
Your voice would just bounce off the wall.
It turned out to be a really good location in terms of its atmosphere and its visual components, but in terms of a place where you might want to live, it was kind of hostile.
We were on a 6-day schedule, and which was very, very, very difficult.
We were living for a month out in some Holiday Inn.
It was in the dead of winter, lots of snow outside.
And we'd get up at 5:30 in the morning, and we'd drive 10 minutes up the street to the mine. So you drive into this big giant maw on the side of the hill.
And the logo for the mine is the head of Medusa with all these snakes coming out. So it's kind of like going into the Temple of Doom.
The car would pull up, and yeah, you go and you walk down the long hall.
And you start smelling this mold, and it was just creepy.
And then they'd meet you in a golf cart, and then you'd have to golf cart in, move closer to the makeup and the set.
And then you start setting up for whatever we were going to do that day. And we were always working simultaneously in terms of preparing and shooting.
So you'd be down there working for hours and hours. It was really, you know, and we worked all the time. That's all we did, you know.
At some points it was really boring in there, and you couldn't go out. There's nowhere to go, you know. It's just another wall staring at you. It's like being imprisoned in a way.
And we would spend the whole day there, sometimes till 11 o'clock at night. And then we would go back.
You know, take a shower, get the makeup off.
Sleep a little bit, wake up. And so we really did not see daylight for a long time.
It was cold down there. They kept it, I think, at 55 degrees.
There was this ongoing limestone dust that would just linger in the air, you know.
And when you blew your nose or coughed, there's black dust in your handkerchief.
And it's like, phew, you're a mess underneath that makeup.
But of course, if they would have said, you guys don't have a hotel, you're going to have to sleep in the mine, down in the bar where the no lights in the lake and the bats are, we would have probably lived there. We just didn't care. We were so psyched about it.
I was excited because I had never done a major film before. I played this tough character. I'm nothing like Sarah. I wish I was. In real life, I am just one big, you know, wimp. Oh, it was fun. Yeah, I felt cool. I always wanted to be a cowgirl. I did.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time.
He was just a mean old son of a bitch. Totally out of his gourd. To be that pricky guy again. Oh, I loved it. Of course, that's, you know, you die for something like that.
We needed a father figure to play the mad doctor.
That wasn't very nice, you know. That wasn't very nice at all. Let's go.
And Richard Liberty's name came up.
You can just sit there in the dark and think about what you've done. Think about it.
And he was superb. He was just superb.
I just think that, you know, Howard Sherman was wonderful. He's sort of the quintessential, you know, zombie that's becoming mainstreamed.
Howard was very handsome man. And he's an excellent actor because you have to be able to express yourself without words. Found it very interesting to watch him develop his character and work his character.
Hello, Bob. Some nice things for you to play with.
I think the most compelling piece of direction that George gave me when we were creating the role of Bub, George said that he wanted a kind of an infant-like quality to him, that there was a kind of an innocence about him, which totally freed my imagination. The way Bub moves is like a baby that has not mastered how to control the nerves, how to control their muscles. I mean, what would it be like if rotting flesh came to life and tried to move? It probably wouldn't move very well. There was a lot of discussion as to who Bub might have been before he died and then resurrected as a zombie. And I remember thinking a lot about that, the idea that he perhaps had some military background. He salutes, he knows how to load a gun and things like that. He's the most intelligent zombie, really, in the entire trilogy. And of course, a smart zombie is about as smart as a very dumb dog, you know, which it's not really saying much. And despite the fact that he's grisly ugly and that he eats human flesh, there's nonetheless something hopeful in that image. The makeup process was very, 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 very long. Day after day after day for a month. It was, it took between 3 and 4 hours to get it on. I flew to Pittsburgh, or I think outside of Pittsburgh, where Tom Savini lived. And in his workshop, he made a plaster mask of my face. And then they sculpted onto that Bub's face, and then they made many, many, many copies of that in a latex mold, so that what they applied to my face perfectly fit my face on the inside, and it was Bub's face on the outside. They also gave me a new set of teeth. The genius of the design and of the material is that it behaves very much like skin. Actually wearing the makeup for long periods of time didn't bother me. What really bothered me was getting it off. And it seemed it took about another hour and a half. And also the adhesive remover, I had a kind of an allergic reaction to it. After a couple of weeks, I looked like I had the advanced stages of syphilis, you know, and everything was breaking out and red and cracking, and it was pretty painful.
When you're born in Pittsburgh, one of the things you want to be when you grow up is a zombie in a George Romero movie, okay? So there was never a shortage of zombies.
People just show up, they want to do it.
People like that you would never expect wanted to be a zombie. Doctors, lawyers.
I think the dean of Carnegie Mellon is in there with his wife. He's a fisherman zombie. Chef Brockett from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a zombie in Day of the Dead. I mean, you know, people just all walks of life and say, hey, let's have a goof.
They were given $1 and a bat hat and a newspaper signed, Stay Scared, George.
And I wouldn't do it for $1 million. I mean, because you got to sit around in all this goop for hours and hours and hours. I think it's miserable, but people enjoy it. And they wear the makeup home. All the local restaurants and McDonald's in the area were reporting dead people walking in and ordering cheeseburgers.
So there was like 4 different levels of zombies. And ultimately, there's such a dramatic difference between those zombies.
I hired a guy, Terry Prince, to manufacture zombie masks. And these were going to be for the background zombies, the zombies that were very far away.
We had, I think, 70 or 100 of those made.
And the costume department, Barbara Anderson, would create their own zombies with hair colors and streaking tips and some fake blood and stuff, you know, cereal, you know.
And you'd walk along this line and they'd just spray you with all these colours, so you're green and black and mottled and what have you.
Those were like the extra zombies. Then we had our hero extras, which would be people that would come in that would get appliances glued to them. And then we had the sort of featured zombies.
The ones that were going to be right in front of the camera. I had 6, 8 guys doing an assembly line of prosthetic makeups on zombies.
And they really enjoyed the process of having the prosthesis put on their face. And a lot of them were local actors from Pittsburgh. They took their characters very seriously.
George would step out front and say, now look, this is the way, you know, zombies walk. And he would demonstrate this slow, kind of like, you know, George is a big guy and he kind of walks a little bit like a zombie himself. And next thing you know, this entire team of people were out doing that shuffle and interpreting their own little style to it.
And some people are very creative. Almost anything goes.
The one thing about Pittsburghers, they're all so game. I had never seen so many uninhibited people in my life. I was stunned. People would do anything.
When we were making those sort of loose, free and easy movies where we were really running the show, it was fun. And the process should be fun. But I think that the best results come from, you know, having a chilled out, you know, a decent working environment and sort of a friendly place.
George is a terrific director. He gives the actors a lot of freedom.
I appreciated the fact that he gave me the time to develop things. Very often, the first time something is plausible and there's not a boom shadow in it, they want to move on. And that was not the case in working with George. I'd do a take and he would be happy with it and I'd have another idea and we'd try it again.
He wants you to contribute. I would go off and sketch things or provide him with some visual information and say, this is what I'm thinking of, and he would say, yeah.
George would be writing the script in Florida and I'd call him and say, how about if we take a shovel and drive it through a zombie's face and pop out the top of his head? Okay, he writes it in the script.
George always deferred to Tom to pull off the gags. Tom designed all of those shots. George would go, okay, Tom, so tell me how this works. Tell me where I shoot it, what's the best way to put the camera, and that's really unheard of. That level of freedom really allows you to make sure that the effects work to their maximum potential. And a movie like Day of the Dead, they did. I mean, there's not one bad effect in that movie. Day of the Dead was really the culmination of Tom's career.
I think he was really dedicated to trying to make these effects look better than anything that he had done before.
Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, Maniac, Prowler, The Burning, there was a whole slew. I was going from one splatter film to the next, and I learned a lot more doing all those films.
Day of the Dead was really the first time where Tom really hired top-notch sculptors to come in. Tom had a big crew behind him. I mean, on all the other films that he had done, he had 1, maybe 2 guys with him.
We had a huge workshop. We began Day of the Dead at my house with 6 guys in my house on the back porch, creating hundreds of small, medium, and large zombie appliances.
Everything that could mix and match.
So if you were to walk on the set to be a zombie, we'd look at you and say, okay, you're a medium, throw these appliances on you. And we would do that to hundreds of zombies. You're down there, it's Halloween again, you know, every day is Halloween. So you're Dr. Frankenstein, you're the monster. So you're doing that constantly, and that's a lot of fun.
When you wanted to get away and hang out and just get away, you went in the shop with the boys, because that's where the good music was, and pretty PAs would be in there, and that's where you'd go.
I would always hear them laughing.
And then kids would want to come in to Tom's workshop in the mines.
A whole bunch of new guys who saw Dawn of the Dead and went, that's what I want to do for a living.
So people would come willingly to help out, and they'd sweep the floor and they'd make tea or coffee and just watch, you know, so that they could learn how to make these weird faces and heads and bullet hits.
In the story, the mad scientist is experimenting with brain tissue. So we just would buy a dozen or so brains and have them thinly sliced so that you can put them under a microscope and look at them.
We purchased a bunch of skeletons from Carolina Biological and started dressing them with like latex and cotton and stuff to dress them. We even sculpted heads that went on top of those skeletons just for dressing. We knew we were going to need rotted corpses.
But it seemed so eerie to be able to do this. I mean, to buy body parts and they were so readily available.
Tom Savini was very hands-on in the razor blade sequence. He wanted to make it work just perfectly. And he very delicately created a little gash and lifted out a piece of rubber skin and created a wound underneath and glued it back on. And then I had to feel where it was and kind of line it up with the razor. So it really looked like flesh being carved away. Having the music on the Walkman was not in the script. One day I was running home and I was thinking, what would Bub do with a Walkman? What would Bub make of that? And I got this idea of some kind and I suggested it to George and his face lit up and he said, well, let's shoot it and see. Working with Richard Liberty was fun. It was fun to surprise him. When he reached up to straighten my earphone, I just grabbed his hand and we, locked eyeball to eyeball and nobody knew what was going to happen next. And then I trusted him because he's the man that fed me and we went on with the scene. George asked me what music I thought Bub should be listening to. And I told him Beethoven. That whole sequence was largely improvised. We didn't exactly know what was going to happen. And it just went very, very well, and we were all very pleased with it.
I never felt obliged to deliver on the violence. In the 3 zombie films that I made, it's almost an essential aspect of it. I don't know, but I guess I get blamed for maybe opening the door a little too much.
Well, I kept trying to remind myself that this was fantasy and not to, take it too seriously. I still kind of turn away, even though I know how it was done. It's still a kind of help.
Oh, Jesus. Ooh, oh my God. Oh, Jesus, God almighty.
And so Tom just went into a flying rage. He said, pump the blood, man. Pump the fucking blood, man. Look, pump the fucking blood, man. If you have blood, let's have blood.
Because, you're eating lunch and, you're surrounded by all the zombies, I mean, you're sitting there and you're looking at this. Geez, I'm getting nauseous just thinking about it now.
I mean, those bites still to this day, I don't think anyone's ever done them as good. What we did was we had this material that was affectionately called chunks of flesh. And all it was tinted latex that you'd roll. You'd paint latex on anything flat, like a mirror or a tabletop, and you'd roll it up, and it would give you these long, stretchy, like tendons of flesh, of muscle. And if you pulled it and stretched it, it would rip and snap back. So when the actress comes in and bites it and tears it back, you see the flesh rip open, and you see those little pieces of muscle and tendon stretch and rip, and then the blood pours out. And it's, to this day, boy, oh boy, is that unbelievable. If you look when Phil Kellum's got his throat torn out, that chunk of skin comes off and you can see the 2 bones underneath, the blood flowing out. Really amazing stuff.
know, when I cut his arm off. That took a few days to shoot. Tim's arm is underneath, you know, buried deep underground, and there's this fake arm, and I take this machete and I hit it.
Action.
And it just like bounced right off the arm.
I think it might have came back and hit Laurie in the head, you know. So we just tore a chunk out of it and put mortician's wax in there. So when the machete hit it, it would bury deep into it. And that worked. Then we took our fake machete with a hole cut in it that would fit over his real arm. So she pressed on that and it looked like it was still cutting through. But we got the advantage of his hand actually moving. And that's something people, when they see that, they can't figure out how we did that. How, you know, the fake arm, the fingers, is it mechanical? No, it's quite simpler than that. So then we used the fake arm and she separated and they cauterize it, and that's the whole effect, you know.
Anytime you hear Tom talking about effects or you see interviews with him, he's always talking about misdirection.
Your mindset needs to be, what do I need to see to make me believe the trick, the magic trick? What do I need to see to make me believe that what I'm seeing is really happening?
The corpse is on the table in Logan's lab. And that was, again, Tom just saying, oh, we cut a hole in the table and we tilt the actor's head back, and then we close it up and you put the appliance there.
Dick Smith, the greatest living makeup artist today, my idol, my hero, the god of makeup, asked me, where the hell is that guy's head? You know, I fooled him. There were two characters that had guts spilling out of them in Day of the Dead. The zombie on the table. That was Mike Tursick, one of my assistants. What we did was we put his body in a hole. And all we did was sculpt a skeletal chest on him with a cavern for the stomach area. And we filled the cavity with intestines, pig intestines from a slaughterhouse. We had a 5-gallon drum of intestines we'd use over and over again. We also sculpted a flap of realistic chest, pectoral muscles, nipple, kind of hair in the chest thing, to go on top of that skeleton. And we attached hemostats to it, so that when he turned, the weight of the hemostats would pull the flesh down. We actually had one long rubber intestine that we wrapped the real intestines around, so that when the intestines slid down this thing and fell out, that this little thing would be dangling out of there. You know, it's sick, but you know, that's you got to think of these things. So then, of course, we did it to Miguel as well. Greg Nicotero was gut boy. He was in charge of the intestines, you know. Now he's got his own company, and he's a millionaire.
And I took the real guts and I wrapped them around the polyfoam guts that were glued to the inside of the appliance. So when he gets up, the guts sort of unravel from the other fake intestines and hit the ground. It was pretty gross. It was good.
So the intestines go back in the refrigerator because we're using the same intestines. We also use the same intestines in Joe Pilato's when they tear Joe Pilato in half.
I came in that morning and the continuity girl, she said, this is a good day to die. Of course, I didn't realize it would be such a lousy day to die. They had the false floor, and there's this little hole. So I crawl into the hole, put the false torso over me. It's got the hole in it. All right, let's get the guts. Well, the guts had been stored in a refrigerator.
While we're gone, somebody unplugs our refrigerator.
Supposedly, accidentally.
For 2 weeks. You can imagine when we got back what it smelled like in that shop. It was worse than an autopsy. It was worse than you can imagine. But we had to use them because we were doing the effect.
So they bring on the guts, and it's like, I've never smelled a dead body before, but this was bad.
All the zombies they had wax and, you know, and I had a respirator on with English leather all over, you know, just something.
They're spraying cologne and there's stuff in the guts.
Poor Joe Pilato. I mean, you can't imagine the stench.
I was covered with blood, it was covered with guts. It was just a mess. So once they covered it, and then they put the shirt on and everything, and it was action, and then they come running in. As soon as they ripped me open, the smell hits me. Oh my God, it's just horrendous.
Tom was behind the camera, beaming. He was so pleased that the levels of gore that he'd created.
Savini. As soon as they said cut, I just started to heave. In fact, I may hurl right now if you want to catch that.
Come on, you fish brace! What the hell's the matter with you?
Pus brain bags of shit. You dumb fucking bags of shit, I'll kick your fucking asses, come on.
And these guys just sat there dreaming up the worst sort of words they could use. Can anybody think of anything worse to say?
What the fuck is wrong with you people? They're dead! They're fucking dead, and you want...
4 weeks after we were in the shoot, Salah called me up and he said, David, there's too much swearing in this script. I said, Salah, you can't go back now. We have 108 expletives that we've already got on film. What do you want me to do, reshoot the whole thing?
Well, if we stay down here long enough, I'll have to lay off the fucking booze steel, because there won't fucking be any of it fucking left.
What are we going to do? We can't get a rating on this film. I said, well, someone at your outfit should have read this script before you put the money up. We're far too in there. If you look at the opening sequence, we shot that in Fort Myers, Florida, on a Saturday.
It was a whole nother world. It felt like a whole other movie because there was light.
That was really difficult to get that much in a can in a weekend, let's say. Yeah, big shots, lots of cameras.
We did the main drag of Fort Myers, and we did several shots about town that showed the devastation.
We got all the local radio stations to say George Romero's here making a movie and we need all these zombies to come out.
It's retirement city down there. They weren't so much into the genre. They came out to be in a movie. They were out to just sort of goof on it more than anything else. That was the problem. We had a lot of footage where people were laughing or yucking it up and weren't really taking it seriously.
I think probably they didn't have the tradition of the Pittsburgh tradition of zombiehood.
The worrying thing for me on the Fort Myers shoot was this alligator that we had.
It was a huge creature. Well, they don't train alligators. They just go out to the swamp and pull one out and, duct tape its nose and then let it loose.
This thing came out the bank and started swishing its tail. Me, I was up the other end of the road. I was gone.
Also, we shot in Sanibel Island, which was absolutely a beautiful place. So we spent a couple of weeks there.
We had a refreshing outdoor experience.
It was a whole different feeling. And then we had to go back in the dark to this mine. Well, there were times where we were so silly and punchy. There was one time I could not get a line because I kept laughing.
And action!
I think we had lost our minds at that point.
Over the period of 12, 14, 16 weeks, 4 months in that mine, people were dropping like flies.
I was sick as a dog. I was off the shoot for, I think, 3 or 4 days.
I had a temperature of 104 degrees.
George got pretty sick at the end of that shoot.
And when you're that sick, you feel like you're really out of it. And, oh, I was out of it.
We called in this local GP, local doctor, and...
He come into the set with his bag.
39 of the crew were seen by this guy.
He was giving people B12 like it was candy.
Hit it. Go.
Sometimes everybody would be in a really bad mood because we were exhausted. But that was really pretty rare. It was very rare. Being on the set of Day of the Dead is like being with your brothers and sisters.
There's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of support between departments.
I have very warm, good feelings, despite all the blood and guts.
We just spent so much time together, just drinking beer and laughing and watching movies.
We were all 20 years old and drinking our asses off and having too much fun that we didn't care. We didn't care. We were working on Day of the Dead.
Now, George A. Romero takes us out of the night, beyond the dawn, and into the darkest day of horror the world has ever known. Day of the Dead.
I believe it grossed its budget in its first weekend, in its opening weekend in New York State alone. It was received well by those people that had an interest in that type of movie. No one has splattered like this before. This is like serious splatterage,
And I went into this Times Square theater. It was very interesting watching the movie because the audience got very excited, particularly when Bub came on the screen. The audience spontaneously broke into a chant. They were going, Bub, 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 Bub.
But I think it was disappointing at the box office. I think people expected another sort of Dawn of the Dead, a great big bloody, adventure comic book type thing, and not as dark as it was. But There's just something about Day of the Dead that I really think works. I think it's better crafted. I like the way it knits together. Day of the Dead has become my favorite of the 3 films.
Topping yourself. I think we did it with Day of the Dead. The effects, I think, are my masterpiece, you know. I mean, I won the Saturn Award for Day of the Dead.
I love Day of the Dead. I would have loved to have seen the movie that we had set out to make. I'm still really proud of the movie that we did make.
And I'm proud of it. I feel blessed to work with somebody like George, to have a large part in a film without having been well known. That was a real gift.
I was very pleased with my performance. I was pleased with what I did. I was hoping that there would be a sequel all about Bub, because Bub goes off into the sunset. I suppose he would have organized the zombies, taught them to eat chicken, and but of course that never came.
To this day, which is 18 years later, I get fan mail at my house.
I've gotten emails and I've gotten letters and I've had visits from people.
I was in a 7-Eleven and buying something and dude, are you Rhodes? You know, the guy behind. I was like, yeah. Wow, you know, man, hey.
And the guy checking us in, you know, looked at it and said, George Romero, are you the George Romero? And the guy, and you know, George said, well, I do make those horror movies. And he goes, oh my God. But it was so funny, you know, like in the middle of nowhere, you know.
It's almost like, you know, they expect us to do this again. I mean, to me, it's fitting. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I get. Are you going to do George's next film? It's like we become Abbott and Costello, you know, of the genre.
Well, I hesitate to say anything about, first of all, I can say that if I do another one, I don't think it's going to be called Twilight of the Dead. At the moment, my title is Dead Reckoning.
Why not? You know, sure. I'd do the effects on that.
We're talking to a major studio about it.
Has to be unique, has to be different. You got to, again, outdo what we've done in Dawn and Day, even though many years have gone by.
Who knows? You can never tell.